I am Mariah Moore. I'm the national organizer at Transgender Law Center, and I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you doing?
Good. I'm so excited to talk to you and help people understand some of the issues that you're tackling and the work you're doing. So
Yes.
thanks for inviting me to be a part of this conversation.
Thank you for agreeing to be a part of this conversation and helping us amplify this much needed message and, a lot of the issues that we're facing right now. It's so greatly appreciated.
Well, I'm going to get into interview mode because I think I want to have you explain a lot of these things, Mariah, for people who are watching and listening and who have tuned in. You are the co-founder of something called House of Tulip. You're coming to me from New Orleans, is that right?
Yes, I am.
And
Hmm.
I'm excited to talk about the work that you're doing at House of Tulip to address the problem that many trans people and gender nonconforming people are having when it comes to housing. And I know there's a particular call to action that we want to encourage people to do that are, very specific. So I thought maybe we should start, Mariah, by talking about House of Tulip, what it is and why you established it. And then we can kind of move into the reasons you established it and dig into that a little bit more.
Absolutely. Thank you. So first, I appreciate that. And I also want to also introduce my former role at Transgender Law Center, the platform in which we are utilizing to raise this issue and to get this message out. So I'm the national organizer at Transgender Law Center. Transgender Law Center is the place where I began to really start being active in this work, really educating myself around issues. And Transgender Law Center actually gave me the platform and the tools that I needed to actually create change right here at home. So I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that, where I'm still currently doing great work and they are supporting me in so many different ways. So the House of Tulip was birthed out of a COVID crisis relief fund that we started here in New Orleans. Myself, Milan, Sherry, Dylan Wagasback, just to name a couple of local trans leaders, where we were able to distribute about $20,000 in a matter of a month. But one thing that we kept seeing come up was the urgent need for housing. Um, and so we got together, myself and Milan, two powerful Black trans women here in the city of New Orleans, and we said, if we could raise this amount of money in a time of economic crisis, health crisis, then what could we do long term? We knew that, we have the solutions, we just needed the resources in order to push this work forward and to create solutions for our community. And so that we did, right? We got together and we brainstormed about a concept, an idea that we could bring forth to provide not only just short-term solutions, but long-term solutions. And that solution that we landed on was housing, because we really knew through experience that housing was the basis to where you could really move forward and address many other issues. And you do that through housing. And so the House of Tulip was birthed. And we have a founder circle that supports the work that myself and Milan are doing, that helps us drive this movement forward, that helps us fundraise and, helps us along every step of the way.
So House of Tulip, Mariah, is basically property that you're establishing residences for trans people, and we'll talk about the issues with homelessness in a moment. But what kinds of services does House of Tulip provide?
Well, so, House of Tulip provides just simply what it states, long-term housing solutions, right? We're in the process of buying and renovating a property that could house up to 10 people. But, how we got to this point was the discrimination that trans people face, right? The discrimination that we continue to see from this current administration, like the rollback of the Equal Access Rule that was implemented by the Obama administration, right? We know that if our community members don't have access to non-discriminatory housing, that if they don't have access to it, they won't feel comfortable seeking out other resources, other life-saving resources like healthcare. They won't feel comfortable seeking out assistance from governmental agencies like the police, or amongst other things. So, this is very instrumental in combating all of the hatred and bigotry that we see coming from the current administration.
And transgender people and often have a challenging time in terms of homelessness. They have a high rate of homelessness among the population. Can you explain why that's such a big issue?
Well, we know that at some point at some point, 1 in 3 trans people in their lifetime will have been or experience homelessness. And homelessness takes on a lot of different shapes and forms, and it looks a lot differently for everybody, right? Homelessness doesn't necessarily mean that you're out on the street. You could be couch surfing. You could be living from hotel to hotel. So it really takes many different forms, right? And so we need to expand the definition of homelessness and really, get the larger community to understand that just because you may be temporarily housed in a hotel does not mean that you're not facing housing insecurity. The trans community are severely underemployed because of discrimination, right? Because we're not represented in ways in which showcase our humanity, right? And so it's hard for trans people, especially Black and brown trans people, to feel safe seeking employment. And we know that if you don't have a safe place to sleep or a stable place to live, that you won't seek out employment. You won't get into care and stay into care. You won't be able to seek out mental health services or any other educational resource programs. And so housing is the fundamental basis here for solving a lot of the issues that we're seeing. And furthermore, housing is and should always be considered a human right.
That's right. And I know that can set sort of people in the trans community off on a spiral because they don't have a place to live. They may be out on the streets and as a result may be more susceptible to violence. And that's something that has plagued the TGNC community as well.
Right. We see, just this year alone, we've lost, that we know of, 26 or 27 TGNC folks, many of them who are Black trans women, many of them who are from the South. And we say that we know of because there are so many other folks out there who may have lost their life due to a plethora of different causes or disparities. But, we have no way of identifying our community members to bring awareness to the disparities that they are facing. When we talk about violence, we oftentimes only talk about the murdering as one form of loss for our community, but it's also systemic in healthcare. It's also systemic in education. It's systemic in employment, but it all goes back to also housing, right? So, we have our community members out here just surviving, surviving doing sex work, surviving, doing under the table work. Mm-hmm. And, they are just open to many more forms of violence. The systems that are here to quote unquote protect our community members oftentimes harm them and criminalize them, and we could get into a whole nother conversation about why decriminalizing sex work is important, right? But we'll stick to housing for now.
Yeah, but I think that's really interesting. I was talking to my daughter who is incredibly well versed on these issues, and we were having a whole conversation about that. And that's an area that, quite frankly, I need to educate myself about and need to understand more. So maybe we can have a different conversation about that on another day. And I just want to take a moment to thank people because 11 people have donated to the Transgender Law Center. And yes. I know how much those donations are appreciated.
Yes,
and
they are.
So I think that people just need to really understand the transgender and nonconforming community in a way that they will really realize how much prejudice and discrimination that community faces. I did a documentary about this called Gender Revolution, where
I watched it.
Well, I tried to, from the, as my daughter makes fun of me, like from a old white cis woman, kind of helping people understand some of the issues. And it's really just about developing empathy, understanding, and relating to other people. So I learned an awful lot doing that, but I still have an awful lot to learn. So I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about these things. And I hope people listening will be curious and want to learn more as well. Anyway, that's my little
Yeah.
speech. I
I,
wanted, oh, go ahead. You go ahead, Mariah.
no, I was just gonna say, building trust, right? Building trust and allyship, right? I don't think that it's necessarily people understanding the trans community. No one's asking for that. We're asking for you to make a common connection that this is a humanitarian issue, right? Like we are
Right.
human, and you need to humanize who we are, right? It's not your job to understand me. It's your job to respect my humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
I and speaking of trust, going back to the equal access rule that Ben Carson went initially when this whole thing was brought up was like, oh no, we're not going to touch that. And then the next day, what do? You propose to gut the entire section pertaining to trans protections. And so, trans people have constantly been under fire. Our trust has constantly been betrayed by people who are, in positions of power to continuously oppress us, who say that they're not on one hand, but continue to do the other on the other hand. And so it's very important to bring those issues to light and realize that these things are happening, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I want to talk about this specific call to action because you're hoping that people will go to the HUD website and where they're proposing to deny access to the trans community to various shelters because they want to change that rule, but you're asking people to go and comment and write to them. First off, why don't we explain what they're trying to do in terms of this change in policy?
Yes, absolutely. So they're trying to propose a rule. Now, a rule is not the same thing as a law. A law means it's binding. You have to follow. It is the law of the land. A rule is just sort of like a guidance, right? It gives entities the discretion and it encourages entities like the shelters that we're talking about to discriminate against certain people, in this case, trans people, gender nonconforming people. This rule would essentially allow shelters that are federally funded to assign someone or deem someone their perceived sex rather than who they authentically present as. And so that is very violent and it's scary for a lot of people because, there is so much other rhetoric being thrown behind it that has no basis, which, Ben Carson was also asked about the assumptions or the rhetoric that he threw out there about trans people potentially being a harm to cisgender women and children. And there is no evidence that suggests that, nor to back that up. You have anti-violence organizations and, who also back that up, that there is no data that supports that. And he himself also said that. But it is a precautionary measure that they're taking and trying to frame it in a way that suggests that this could happen at an increased rate because there aren't these types of discriminatory rules in place.
Right. And we're talking about shelters that accept any amount of federal funding. So,
Even $1.
right, this rule could be applied very broadly to a variety of shelters, basically saying that you cannot be admitted for the gender with which you identify. And so they're keeping a lot of trans people out, and they can't really find shelter as a result of that.
Well, it's not that they can't find it, it's that they're discouraged from even seeking it because trans people don't even want to deal with the implied violence or the potential violence that they could face. And violence looks, like I've said before, violence is not just physical violence, it's verbal, it's emotional, you know. we say all the time that by just using a trans person's proper pronouns, it reduces the suicide rate. Imagine what a trans person would go through going to a shelter and being told, you're not who you say you are not a woman, and you have to sleep here with men. That is extremely violent. They could face sexual assault, physical assault, of course, verbal assault, from the catcalling to the heckling. So all of these different things, it's a discouragement to trans people to even begin to seek out these resources.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the dangers that trans people face when they're forced to be in a situation that does not align with their gender identity, and you just outlined that really well. So if people go to the HUD website, and you can tell us specifically
Yes.
where we can direct people, if they write a comment, my daughter explained to me that every comment
Has to be read.
read and replied to.
Yes.
If we flood that website with comments talking about how discriminatory this policy is and how objectionable it is, then it would result in slowing down the implementation of this policy. Is that right?
Well, yes, and I also just want to name that. So yes, so before I get into that, housingsaveslives.org. It's also linked in our bio. If you go to it, you can leave a comment. It doesn't take long at all, maybe 2 minutes. The administration has to read every single comment and reply to every single comment. And the deadline to do that is tomorrow, the 22nd. But I want to go back into the fact that this proposed rule would be a direct contradiction to the Supreme Court ruling that we just saw. That was handed down in the Bostock case, which included the Amy Stevens workplace case, that says that trans people are protected under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, which includes sex, and gender identity is defined as sex under this ruling. So this administration is completely ignoring what the Supreme Court says, completely ignoring the law of the land, and still going in and trying to determine one's life in their own way, based on their own personal beliefs and values.
Mm-hmm. So do they go to that particular website that you just mentioned to write comments, and then
Yes, it's the easiest. It's an easy way. It's a housingsaveslives.org is a campaign that was started to directly combat this upcoming or proposed rule. And so if you go there, it's already filled out for you. You can add a little more or not. It'll ask you a few questions. It's pre-filled already, and it's the simplest way to do it.
And so that'll be then go to the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys forward that to
Yes.
HUD?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
The housingsaveslives.org. It directly submits it. So it's a one and done process.
And what are some of the other issues that you are working on? And I'm curious, Mariah, are you finding in this very difficult time in our country that you're getting a lot of support from people who do object to these discriminatory policies, to turning back the clock on TGNC people?
Well, quite frankly, Katie, I don't really know because I don't ask them, right? I just continue to do the work that changes the hearts and minds of people. I'm not asking them whether they support TGNC people or not. We're just doing the work.
Are you getting a lot of feedback, financial interest in the work you're doing during?
Oh, yes. So in this moment, right, community is showing up in big ways, right? We have community funding community, but the important thing about that for us to remember is that community has always taken care of community. We see some more external corners of community coming in now to support, but our core community is really stepping up to the plate to make sure and ensure the safety of the more marginalized community members. We have seen so many small but significant donations from community members, and they're reoccurring, which means that this means a lot to not only the people who need it, but also to the people who are in places to assist. You know, when we think about what that support and what taking care of each other looks like, we go back to ballroom, right? Ballroom mothers and pageant houses, and how those were a source of not only just entertainment and culture, but it was also a supportive family that saved lives, right? You know, and even to present day, from us lending out a spare room, lending our couch, splitting the little bit of money that we do have in our purse with our next community member. Our communities have always come together to take care of each other. You know, even with myself, my personal story, I'm always reminded that I am here because I am here on the shoulders of all those sex workers who guided me, right? All those brilliant, resilient, beautiful Black women who happened to be trans, that were sex workers, that let me know that my life had value and meaning, and that it was going to go somewhere, and that I was going to do big things. And even though I had to do some things to survive, I'm here now, and I'm here because of them. And the most important thing that I want our trans community to know is that the resilience that you move forward with every day, it's in your DNA. It's who you are. You just have to tap into it. We are a resilient people. We were given this life because we're strong enough to live it. And so, yes, to answer your question, people see the resilience, and they see the many projects that are being spearheaded by TGNC folks, specifically Black trans women and femmes, and they're supporting that.
Well, you're an incredibly inspiring person, Mariah, and I'm so happy to get a chance to just have this conversation with you. And it's just the tip of the iceberg, obviously. There's so many issues under this umbrella that we're talking about, not just about housing, but about employment, about incarceration and violence. But I think anybody watching this sees what a brilliant, generous, giving person you are, and what you're doing to support people who have been marginalized for so long, and who need to be heard and seen, and most of all, accepted.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, Katie, like I said, I didn't get here alone, nor will I move forward alone. You didn't get to where you are alone. You know, we all got to where we are because of someone else, because of the work that they put in, because of the sacrifices that they made. You know, I wanted to ask you a question
Sure.
before we close.
Yeah, of
I
course.
just wanted to make a connection with you and ask you, what does home feel like to you? When you think about home, what do you think about?
I think about the people I love. I think I'm the kind of person who, when I look at a house, I don't look at the architecture, or like, what the house looks like, or the structure. I look at the photographs right away. I'm just drawn instantly to the people who live in a place. And I'm lucky, I feel very, very privileged. I grew up in a really loving home. I'm lucky that I have helped create I hope, a loving home for my family. So I think it's the feeling of being around people who love and care about you. Obviously you need to have, as you say, housing, saves lives. But I think for me, it's the people I care about and who care about me that make me feel that I'm home and taken care of. How about you, Mariah?
I knew you were going to ask me that. But yes, and I think we are very similar in that aspect. So making that connection, that we are so close when we think about what home is. But what I also think about when I think about home is where my people are, and not just under a roof, right? But where they are in the world, what struggles they're facing, and how that connects to mine, how I'm home in their hearts, and how they're at home in my heart. How we're helping each other every day through the storytelling that we're doing, right? So not just a structure for me. Home is where my people are. It's where we exist. It's where we thrive and laugh together. It may be a community center today. It may be my personal home tomorrow. Right now, I feel right at home in this interview with you, with so many of my community members that I love and adore, that I see popping up in the comments. You know, once House of Tulip's doors open, that will be considered home for me. So living in the hearts and minds of my people is home, and likewise. So yes, home takes so many different shapes and forms, and home is also in this work that I am so incredibly blessed to be doing, giving my life and devoting my life to the betterment of my people. And so that's where my home is. And yeah.
They're blessed to have you, I think. And when will House of Tulip be opening its doors? Can you give us an idea? And I know there's similar, similar situations being set up in other cities as well, which is a really positive thing. And for people to know that as well, like Glitz,
Yes.
it's Glitz. My daughter raised $5,000 for Glitz.
Yes.
It
Incredible.
has a pen pal. What was the program, Carrie, that you got your pen pal from? Black and Pink.
Black and Pink. Dominique Morgan is the executive director of Black and Pink. We
Very
have House of Rebirth.
that she is really been communicating with, and I think it's really enriching her life, and hopefully her pen pals enjoying the relationship too. But I think there are a lot of organizations that are doing terrific work. But sorry, I kind of got ahead of myself. When is House of Tulip going to open its doors?
So right now we are in our, I'm going to go ahead and say it, but we are actually closing on a property, and we will go into the redesign and construction of said property. And from there, we will hope to open sometime in spring. And until then, we're coming up with strategic ways to also keep our local community members housed and provide them with assistance. And so we're working tirelessly to make that happen. But I also wanted to give a shout out to the House of Rebirth in Dallas, Texas, the housing initiative in Atlanta that was spearheaded by Jesse Pratt Lopez. I see Brave Space Alliance in Chicago is trying to start a housing program. My sister's house in Memphis, just so many incredible things. Glitz, like you mentioned. I mean, you just see the brilliant, powerful leadership of Black trans women regardless of everything that they went through, right? All the trauma, the pain, they take that and they transform that into something magnificent and powerful. And also Lighthouse, that is being spearheaded by Dominique Morgan, which is a entity of Black and Pink.
Oh, wow. Well, I mean, there are so many ways to reach out and support this really important cause. And I'm just, I'm going to match the donations. If you guys get up to 1,000, it'll be even better, because I'm going to match whatever has been raised here in the course of our conversation, because I've been blessed and I want to support you all on the incredible work that you do. And maybe I'll even do more than match it. But if just want to urge everybody, if you have been moved by this conversation and by the powerful words of Mariah, and understand how great this need is, please find it in your heart to basically make a donation, big or small, to the Transgender Law Center, and we can really create a better space for everyone. So, Mariah, anything else you want to say before we go?
Well, I've watched you since I was a kid, but hey.
Old.
No, I mean, I'm 32, but
Oh, well, you did watch me as a kid. Did you grow up in New Orleans also?
Yes, I grew up in New Orleans. A lot of my family is from the North Shore of New Orleans, which is the Madisonville, Mandeville area. Yeah, so yeah, I just think that, everything that you've done here today, giving us and amplifying the message that needs to get out and encouraging people to go to housingsaveslives.org, to fill out a public comment so that we can, just really combat this hatred and bigotry that's coming from this administration. So I want to thank you again.
Absolutely. And perhaps everyone who's watching this could ask a few friends to do the same thing, and we can flood the zone, as they say, which is probably not a good thing to say to someone who lives in New Orleans, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Brian, everyone, thanks so much. And wait, someone's asking, what can they do in small towns?
Oh, well, great question. And yeah, so I'll say it really quickly. So in small towns, seek out local initiatives, local organizations that just really speak to or align with your values, right? So, seek out an organizer doing work, see how you can be involved, really put skin in the game, right? Educate yourself on some local initiatives that are happening. So yeah, just really pour back into local community, right?
Is
National organizations are great. Hmm?
I was just going to ask Mariah, is there like a clearinghouse where people can go and they can find out sort of what they can do if they want to help nationally, or what they can do locally if they can find organizations? I'm just curious if there's something like that exists.
I mean, you can go to a lot of different major national websites, and they'll have resource areas that can direct you to what's in your state. Transgender Law Center has a similar toolkit on our website under resources that just directs you to different states and what's kind of available in that prospective state. But we also do impact litigation. So a lot of the things that we have listed are in terms of litigation and assistance in that way. But yeah, so I mean, Google is always your friend. I
Yeah.
always say that.
The Human Rights Campaign. There's so many great organizations. Carrie, you want to say a quick hi to Mariah? Come say a quick hi. Just come say. Carrie's been so active in this space. This is my daughter, everybody. Really. Yes, you have.
Hi, Carrie. How are you?
Hi.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for helping set all of this up.
My daughter is a little shy, which is unlike me. I'm just like, but anyway.
Well, it's your job to ask tough questions. So,
It's great talking to you. And thanks, everyone, for listening to this conversation. Keep on donating. And Mariah, I hope our paths cross again, and let me know how I can be helpful.
I will. Thank you so much. The one and only Katie Couric.
So, Mariah. Mwah. Thanks.
Yeah.